When 28-year-old Dr. Amara Williams barely grazed the crimson Ferrari with her fingertips, billionaire tech mogul Ethan Kross exploded in rage. But her next 4 words would shatter his world, expose his deepest shame, and make him realize he just met the woman who would either destroy him or save his soul. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to smash that subscribe button for more. Also, share your thoughts, and let me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow's story is going to be just as epic, so don't miss out. Now, let's continue. The 51st floor of Kross Industries pierced Manhattan's skyline like a steel arrow aimed at heaven, but 34-year-old Ethan Kross hadn't looked up from his wall of monitors in 4 hours. At 6'2" with sharp green eyes and prematurely silver temples that made him look distinguished rather than old, he commanded his empire with the cold precision of a man who'd learned that emotions were expensive luxuries he couldn't afford. His corner office smelled of Italian leather and abandoned coffee cups. The mahogany desk, larger than most people's bedrooms, held 3 phones, 7 monitors, and 0 personal photos. Awards lined the walls like emotional tombstones. Forbes 30 Under 30, Tech Innovator of the Decade, Most Eligible Bachelor, a title that made him laugh bitterly every time he saw it. Eligible for what? Another networking dinner with women who saw his $12 billion net worth instead of the hollow man behind it. His phone buzzed with the mechanical persistence that had become the soundtrack of his life. Mr. Kross? Senator Davidson's office moved the infrastructure meeting to 4 p.m. Something about a last-minute campaign stop. Ethan's jaw tightened, the muscle jumping like a live wire. The government contract for electric vehicle charging networks could revolutionize transportation nationwide, and cement his legacy as more than just another tech billionaire. But what good was legacy when you had no one to share it with? Fine. I need air anyway. Have the prototype ready at the Manhattan showroom. He needed to clear his head, and the Ferrari always helped. She was the only thing in his life that responded to his touch without wanting something in return. 23 blocks away in a cramped Washington Heights studio, Dr. Amara Williams stood before a cracked bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her navy interview blazer for the 5th time. At 28, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that couldn't be diminished by financial struggle. Warm brown skin that seemed to glow from within, intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing, and natural hair styled in neat twists that framed her face like a crown. But it was her posture that truly set her apart, shoulders back, chin up, carrying herself like royalty despite the blazer's worn elbows and the apartment's peeling paint. Brilliance doesn't need permission to shine, baby girl. She whispered her grandmother's words, the same voice that had guided her through MIT at 19, through her PhD in electrical engineering at 24, through 3 months of unemployment that had stripped away everything except her unshakable dignity. Her studio apartment was a study in proud poverty, MIT and Stanford degrees hanging beside her grandmother's faded photograph, both reminders that worth wasn't measured by square footage or bank accounts. Today's interview at Morrison Automotive could change everything, if she could convince them that a black woman from the Bronx could revolutionize their electric propulsion systems. The leather portfolio by her door, her grandmother's last gift, contained 5 years of innovation. Patents for battery management systems that could double electric vehicle range. Thermal regulation designs that solved problems Tesla was still struggling with. Every blueprint represented sleepless nights fueled by instant coffee and determination. Every equation a step toward her dream of creating technology that served humanity instead of just profit. On the subway into Manhattan, she practiced her pitch in her head, feeling the familiar fire of purpose burning away her nerves. The other passengers saw a young black woman in a slightly worn blazer. They had no idea they were sitting next to the future of sustainable transportation. By the time she emerged onto Fifth Avenue, Dr. Amara Williams was ready to change the world. That's when she saw the Ferrari. The SF-90 Straightale sat outside Prestige Motors like a crimson poem written in carbon fiber and impossible dreams. To most people, it represented wealth beyond imagination. Nearly $500,000 of automotive perfection. But Amara didn't see luxury. She saw engineering artistry. The hybrid system that married a 769 horsepower V8 with 3 electric motors wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary. She approached slowly, her trained eye drinking in every detail like a sommelier studying a perfect vintage. The way the active aerodynamics adjusted airflow wasn't just beautiful, it was functional poetry. The thermal management system, the regenerative braking integration, the seamless transition between electric and combustion power. This represented everything she loved about automotive engineering. Almost unconsciously, her fingertips traced the air just above the hood, following lines she could visualize beneath the surface. Cooling channels, battery placement. The elegant dance between tradition and innovation that made this machine possible. Magnificent, isn't she? A salesman appeared beside her, his smile as polished as the car's finish. In his 50s with kind eyes and a slightly rumpled suit, he looked like someone who genuinely loved cars rather than just commissions. 790 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. Though I should mention, she starts at just under 500,000. Amara smiled, completely unfazed by the price tag. The acceleration's impressive, but I'm more interested in the thermal transition management between power sources. The way Ferrari solved the heat dissipation challenge during high-performance switching, that's the real innovation. Most manufacturers are still struggling with thermal efficiency at these power levels. The salesman, his nameplate read Frank, blinked in surprise, clearly recalibrating his assumptions. You work in automotive? Electrical engineer, she said, the title carrying weight despite her current unemployment. I specialize in hybrid propulsion systems and battery management. I actually have 3 patents pending that could improve this exact thermal regulation issue. Frank's entire demeanor shifted from sales pitch to genuine interest. For the next 10 minutes, they discussed torque vectoring, regenerative braking efficiency, and the future of sustainable high-performance vehicles. Amara's passion was evident in every technical detail, her eyes lighting up as she explained concepts that most people couldn't even pronounce. Standing there on Fifth Avenue, discussing the intricate ballet of electricity and combustion that made the Ferrari possible, Amara felt like herself again. Not a woman fighting to survive in an expensive city, but a visionary who belonged in this world of innovation and possibility. She was so absorbed in explaining her ideas for improving the cars' already impressive systems that she didn't notice the man approaching from behind until his voice cut through her moment like a blade of ice. Get your goddamn hands off my car. Have you ever been passionate about something others didn't expect you to understand? What drives your deepest interests? Share your thoughts below. We love hearing about what makes you light up. The voice hit Amara like a physical blow, sharp enough to make her stumble backward from the Ferrari. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs, to face the source of that ice-cold fury. Ethan Cross stood 3 feet away, and he was magnificent in his rage. Designer suit tailored to perfection, green eyes blazing with an anger that seemed to radiate heat despite their cold color. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping, his hands balled into fists at his sides. Everything about him screamed wealth, power, and barely contained violence. I said get away from my car. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. What the hell do you think you're doing? The accusation in his tone was unmistakable. Not what are you doing, but the clear implication that whatever it was criminal. Frank the salesman had gone pale and stepped back, suddenly very interested in his shoes. Amara felt the familiar sting of assumption, the weight of every stereotype that had followed her through MIT lecture halls and corporate boardrooms. But she'd learned long ago that dignity was armor, and she wore it now like a queen. I was admiring the engineering, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. I wasn't touching anything. Ethan's eyes swept over her, the worn blazer, the carefully maintained but clearly second-hand appearance, the way she stood too close to something worth more than most people made in a decade. His assessment was swift, brutal, and wrong on every level that mattered. Right. Admiring. The word dripped with disbelief. Look, I don't know what kind of scheme you're running, but I've seen this before. Pretty girl gets close to expensive car, owner shows up to find mysterious scratches, suddenly there's a lawsuit or an insurance claim. The words hung in the air like poison. Around them, other shoppers had begun to notice the commotion. Phones were discreetly emerging from pockets. A small crowd was gathering, drawn by the unmistakable scent of public drama. Amara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but not from shame, from pure crystalline fury. "Excuse me. You heard me." Ethan stepped closer, using his height advantage like a weapon. "I don't know what your angle is, but find another mark. This car costs more than you'll make in 10 years. The casual cruelty of it, the assumptions piled on assumptions, the way he looked at her like she was something he might scrape off his shoe, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect, devastating clarity. Frank cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, I can vouch for the lady. She was just, nobody asked you," Ethan snapped without taking his eyes off Amara. "Call security. I want her removed from the premises." That's when something shifted in Amara's expression. The hurt and anger didn't disappear. They transformed into something far more dangerous. A smile spread across her face, small and sharp as a scalpel. "Before you call security," she said, her voice carrying a strange musical quality that made everyone within earshot lean closer, "you might want to ask yourself one question." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "And what's that?" Amara took a step closer to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that didn't match his assumptions about her at all. When she spoke, her voice was soft, conversational, and utterly lethal. "How exactly did a Harvard Business School dropout with a 2.3 GPA build a $12 billion empire?" The world stopped. Ethan's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, surprise, and then a dawning horror as the implications sank in. Around them, the small crowd pressed closer, phones now openly recording. The question hung in the air like a ticking bomb. "What did you just say?" His voice was barely audible. Amara's smile widened, but it wasn't cruel, it was surgical. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong? I thought someone as successful as you wouldn't mind discussing your educational background." Frank was staring at both of them like he was watching a tennis match played with grenades. Other onlookers had their phones out, sensing that whatever was happening was about to go viral. Ethan's face had gone white. The carefully constructed image he'd spent 15 years building, the brilliant tech mogul, the innovative genius, the self-made billionaire, was cracking like ice under pressure. Harvard Business School was on every bio, every interview, every piece of corporate literature. "How do you," he started, then stopped, realizing that asking the question would confirm it was true. "No." Amara finished gently. "The same way I know that your company's new thermal regulation patent application has a critical flaw in the third-stage cooling algorithm that's going to get it rejected by the USPTO in approximately 6 weeks. The blood drained from Ethan's face completely now. That patent was classified. It was the cornerstone of the government contract, the foundation of cross-industries expansion into electric vehicle infrastructure. The only people who should know about it were his top engineers, and, the same way I know," Amara continued, her voice growing stronger, more confident, "that you're about to lose the biggest contract in your company's history because you're trying to solve a heat dissipation problem with 1990s thinking." Ethan stood frozen, watching his world tilt on its axis. Around them, the crowd was growing larger, phones capturing every word. This was a disaster in the making, not just personal humiliation, but corporate catastrophe. "Who are you?" he whispered. Amara reached into her portfolio and withdrew a single sheet of paper. She held it out to him with the same careful precision she'd used to trace the Ferrari's lines. "Dr. Amara Williams. MIT summa cum laude, Ph.D. in electrical engineering from Stanford. And the woman whose doctoral thesis, Advanced Thermal Management in High-Performance Hybrid Systems, your R&D department has been trying to reverse engineer for the past 8 months." Ethan took the paper with hands that trembled slightly. It was a patent application, her patent application, for a thermal regulation system so elegant, so revolutionary, that it made his company's attempts look like finger paintings. "This is impossible," he breathed. No, Amara said quietly, and for the first time, there was sadness in her voice instead of anger. What's impossible is that a woman who could save your company millions of dollars and solve your biggest engineering challenge can't get a single interview because of what she looks like. She turned to go, then paused, looking back at him over her shoulder. But don't worry, Mr. Cross. I'm sure your 2.3 GPA will figure something out. As she walked away, leaving Ethan standing beside his Ferrari like a man who just watched his entire world explode, the crowd began to murmur. Phones were already uploading videos. Social media was about to have a field day. And in that moment, watching her disappear into the Manhattan crowd with more dignity than he'd ever possessed, Ethan Cross realized he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Amara's hands didn't start shaking until she was 3 blocks away from the Ferrari. She ducked into a Starbucks, ordered a coffee she couldn't afford, and found a corner table where she could finally let her composure crack. What had she just done? Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Maya. "Girl, you're going viral. Some billionaire CEO drama? Call me." Amara's stomach dropped. She opened Twitter with trembling fingers and watched her life explode in real time. The hashtag #FerrariGate was already trending. Videos from a dozen different angles showed her devastating takedown of Ethan Cross, each one racking up thousands of retweets and comments. "Queen destroyed that racist billionaire. This woman is goals. Someone give her a job. Billionaire bro got educated." But mixed in with the support were darker comments that made her blood run cold. She probably looked up his info to run some scam. Gold digger got caught and tried to flip the script. Typical. Play the victim when you get called out. Her interview at Morrison Automotive was in 2 hours. Would they even see her now, or had she just become too controversial to touch? She'd spent years building her reputation, and in one moment of justified anger, had she destroyed everything? Amara closed her eyes and heard her grandmother's voice. "Baby girl, sometimes standing up for yourself costs everything. But laying down for others costs your soul." She had no regrets about what she'd said. Only about what it might cost her. Back at Cross Industries, Ethan's corner office felt like a war room under siege. His PR team had assembled with the speed of a military response unit, laptops open, phones buzzing with a constant ping of notifications. "Sir, we need a statement," his communications director, Janet, said without looking up from her screen. #FerrariGate is trending #2 worldwide. The videos have been viewed 12 million times in the past hour. Ethan stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the street where normal people lived normal lives without having their deepest secrets weaponized against them in public. His Harvard lie wasn't just embarrassing, it was potentially criminal. Fraud charges. SEC investigations. The government contract would evaporate instantly. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly. "Bad." Janet's voice was grim. "Senator Davidson's office called. They're reassessing the partnership in light of recent revelations about corporate transparency." Translation: they're running for cover. His phone rang. The board of directors. The shareholders. The media. Everyone wanted answers he didn't have and explanations that would only make things worse. But underneath the panic, something else was eating at him. The look in Amara's eyes when she'd said those final words about not getting interviews. The sadness that had cut deeper than any anger. "Janet, I need you to run a background check on Dr. Amara Williams." "Sir, with respect, I don't think going after her is the right, not to go after her. To understand her. Because the woman who had dismantled his life in 60 seconds wasn't some opportunistic scammer. She was exactly who she claimed to be, a brilliant engineer who had seen through his carefully constructed facade in minutes. And if her patent was real, if her thermal regulation system actually worked, his assistant knocked. "Mr. Cross? Dr. Williams is here to see you." Ethan's heart stopped. "What?" "She's in the lobby. Says she has a business proposition." 30 minutes earlier, Amara had sat in that Starbucks watching her life spiral and made a decision that would have terrified her grandmother and made her proud in equal measure. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide. And she wasn't going to let Ethan Cross destroy himself with his own stupidity when she could save them both. The elevator ride to the 51st floor of Cross Industries felt like ascending to Judgment Day. But Amara had faced worse odds than this. She'd been the only black woman in most of her MIT classes. She defended her doctoral thesis to a panel of men who questioned every word. She'd survived 3 months of unemployment while watching less qualified candidates get the job she deserved. This was just another room full of people who underestimated her. She'd been handling those her entire life. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into the most luxurious office space she'd ever seen. Glass, steel, and enough marble to build a small monument. The receptionist, a perfectly coiffed blonde in her 20s, looked up with barely concealed disdain. "Can I help you?" "Dr. Amara Williams to see Mr. Cross." "He'll want to see me." The receptionist's expression suggested otherwise, but she made the call anyway. Her face went through several interesting expressions during the brief conversation. He'll see you now. 51st floor, corner office." As Amara walked through the corridors of Cross Industries, she noticed the employees. They recognized her, some from the viral videos, others from the company-wide emergency meeting that had undoubtedly been called. But instead of hostility, she saw something unexpected in their faces: curiosity, respect, even admiration. Maybe destroying a billionaire's ego in public wasn't the worst career move after all. The knock on his office door came exactly when Ethan expected it, but he still wasn't prepared for the sight of Amara Williams walking into his sanctuary. She moved like she owned the place, her worn blazer somehow looking more dignified than his $1,000 suit. "Dr. Williams." He stood, uncertain whether to offer his hand or call security. "Mr. Cross." She didn't sit down, didn't wait for an invitation. "We need to talk. I think you've said enough for one day." "Have I?" She pulled out her phone, showed him the trending hashtags. "Because from where I'm standing, I just gave you the biggest gift of your career." Ethan stared at her like she'd spoken in ancient Greek. "Gift? You just destroyed my reputation in front of 12 million people." "No, I exposed a lie that was going to destroy you anyway." Amara finally sat down, crossing her legs with casual elegance. The Harvard thing was going to come out eventually. Journalists investigate. Competitors dig. Disgruntled employees talk. I just ripped the Band-Aid off publicly instead of letting it fester privately. And that's supposed to be helpful. It is when you have the solution to your actual problem. She leaned forward, and for the first time since she'd walked in, her mask slipped slightly. "Mr. Cross, your company is 3 weeks away from losing the biggest contract in its history. Your thermal regulation system doesn't work. Your engineers are brilliant, but they're trying to solve a 21st century problem with 20th century thinking." Ethan felt his anger warring with curiosity. "And you can fix it?" "I already have." She pulled out her portfolio, withdrew a thick folder of documents. 3 years ago. But apparently, nobody wanted to listen to a black woman from the Bronx talk about automotive engineering. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos, but inside this office, 2 lives hung in the balance. "Why are you here, Dr. Williams?" Ethan asked finally. "After what I said to you, after how I treated you, why are you trying to help me?" Amara was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it. "Because despite being a prejudiced ass with a fake Harvard degree, you built something extraordinary. Cross Industries employs 47,000 people. The government contract could accelerate electric vehicle adoption by a decade. And because..." She hesitated, then met his eyes directly. "Because I've spent my whole life being judged by what I look like instead of what I can do. I wouldn't wish that feeling on anyone. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and helping someone who hurt you? What drives those impossible decisions? Tell us your thoughts below. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. But for the first time since she'd walked away from his Ferrari, Ethan Cross began to understand exactly what kind of woman he was dealing with, and exactly how much trouble he was in. The silence in Ethan's office stretched until it became almost unbearable. He stared at the documents Amara had placed on his desk, patents, research papers, thermal regulation diagrams that looked like artistic masterpieces compared to his company's crude attempts. "Show me," he said finally. Amara blinked. "Excuse me?" "The solution. Show me how you'd fix our system." He gestured toward the wall of monitors. "We have 3 weeks before the government presentation. If you're as brilliant as you claim to be, prove it." "I don't have to prove anything to you," Amara said, but there was curiosity in her voice now. "Especially not after, you're right." The admission seemed to physically pain him. "You don't owe me anything. But you said you wanted to help those 47,000 employees. You said you cared about accelerating electric vehicle adoption. Well, here's your chance." Amara studied his face, looking for the trap. "What exactly are you proposing?" 3 weeks. You work with my engineering team to implement your thermal regulation system. If it works, if we get the contract, I'll offer you a position. Chief Innovation Officer. Full patent credits. Equity stake. And if it doesn't work? Ethan's smile was grim. Then we both go down in flames together. Because without your system, we're dead anyway. Before Amara could respond, Ethan's assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Cross? Senator Davidson's team just arrived. They're requesting an immediate meeting to discuss the viral incident and its impact on the partnership." Ethan and Amara locked eyes. The moment of truth had arrived faster than either expected. "Send them up," Ethan said, then turned to Amara. "Stay. Please." "Why would I? Because they're going to ask about you anyway. And because if we're going to save this deal, we need to control the narrative starting right now." 5 minutes later, Senator Davidson's team filed into the office like a delegation of undertakers. Senator Patricia Davidson herself, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and radiating the kind of political authority that could make or break billion-dollar deals, led the group. Behind her came her chief of staff, 2 policy advisors, and a man Amara recognized as the head of the Department of Energy's Transportation Initiative. "Mr. Cross," Senator Davidson said without preamble, "I think you know why we're here." "Senator Davidson, thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet Dr. Amara Williams, our new Chief Innovation Officer." Amara's head snapped toward Ethan in shock, but he kept his expression neutral. The senator's eyebrows rose slightly. "Dr. Williams, I presume you're the woman from the viral video." "Yes, ma'am." Amara stood, extending her hand with the kind of confidence that had carried her through every boardroom she'd ever entered. "Though I hope you'll judge me by my engineering credentials rather than my social media presence." "MIT and Stanford, according to my briefing," the senator said, her handshake firm. "Impressive. But I have to ask, what exactly is your relationship with Cross Industries? Because as of this morning, you weren't an employee." Ethan stepped forward smoothly. "Dr. Williams has been consulting with us for several months on our thermal regulation challenges. Today's incident made us realize we needed to formalize that relationship immediately." It was a lie so smooth and confident that even Amara almost believed it. But she could see the senator wasn't buying it entirely. "Mr. Cross, I'll be direct. This morning's video raises serious questions about corporate culture and truthfulness. We can't partner with a company that doesn't align with our administration's values on diversity and inclusion." "I understand your concerns," Ethan said, "and I take full responsibility for my behavior. It was inexcusable." "Apologies are nice, but I need to see systemic change. Senator Davidson turned to Amara. Dr. Williams, speak frankly. Can you work with this man? Because if Cross Industries can't demonstrate a genuine commitment to diversity and innovation, we have other contractors who can. The room went dead silent. Amara could feel every eye on her, could sense the weight of 47,000 jobs, could practically hear Ethan's heart hammering beside her. This was her moment of power. She could destroy him with a word, could walk away and let him burn. Instead, she thought about her grandmother's voice. Baby girl, true strength isn't about getting revenge. It's about building something better. Senator Davidson, Amara said carefully, Mr. Cross made assumptions about me based on my appearance. Those assumptions were wrong and hurtful. But... She paused, choosing her words like stepping stones across a river. I've seen his company's work. The innovation happening here could transform how America thinks about sustainable transportation. I believe in that mission enough to try working with someone who's willing to learn from his mistakes. Ethan's relief was almost palpable, but Senator Davidson wasn't finished. That's admirable, Dr. Williams. But I need more than hope. I need proof that Cross Industries can deliver on its promises. Our technical team has identified significant flaws in your thermal regulation patent application. Without solving those issues, there's no deal. What if I told you those flaws have already been solved? Amara said quietly. The senator's chief of staff leaned forward. By whom? Amara smiled, the same surgical smile she'd used on Ethan earlier, but gentler now. By me. 3 years ago. She moved to Ethan's computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pulled up her patent. Documents. The wall of monitors filled with thermal regulation diagrams, heat dissipation models, and mathematical equations that looked like poetry written in numbers. The Cross Industries design fails because it tries to manage thermal transition using linear cooling algorithms, she explained, falling into the rhythm of teaching. But hybrid systems don't generate heat linearly. They generate it in cascading waves that require exponential cooling responses. The Department of Energy representative was leaning forward now, studying the equations with growing excitement. Dr. Williams, this is extraordinary. If this works, it could improve efficiency by 30%. 37%, actually, Amara corrected. And reduce manufacturing costs by nearly 40% once you factor in the simplified component architecture. Senator Davidson looked between Amara and Ethan. Mr. Cross, how long have you had access to this technology? As of today, he admitted. Dr. Williams is newly joining our team. I see. The senator's expression was unreadable. Well, Dr. Williams, it seems you've given us something to think about. But talk is cheap. Can you have a working prototype in 3 weeks? Amara felt her pulse quicken. 3 weeks to integrate her theoretical work into Cross Industries' existing systems, to manage a team of engineers who might resent her sudden elevation, to prove herself on the biggest stage of her career. Yes, ma'am. I can. Then you have 3 weeks to save this partnership, Senator Davidson said, standing. But understand this, we'll be watching closely. Any hint that this is a publicity stunt rather than genuine change, and we're gone. After the delegation left, Amara and Ethan stood alone in his office, the weight of what they just committed to settling between them like fog. 3 weeks, Ethan said finally. 3 weeks, Amara agreed. I don't suppose you have any idea how we're going to make this work. For the first time since she'd walked into his office, Amara smiled genuinely. Mr. Cross, I've been waiting my whole life for someone to ask me that question. I have lots of ideas. Ethan, he said quietly, if we're going to save each other's careers, you might as well call me Ethan. Amara. She extended her hand. And for the record, this doesn't mean I've forgiven you for what you said. I wouldn't expect you to. He shook her hand, surprised by the strength of her grip. "But maybe we can build something good enough that forgiveness becomes possible." As they stood there, hands clasped in a partnership neither had planned but both desperately needed, neither realized they were standing at the exact spot where Ethan's life was about to change forever. The Cross Industries engineering lab occupied an entire floor and looked like something from a science fiction movie. Holographic displays showed 3D engine models rotating in midair, while banks of quantum computers hummed quietly in climate-controlled chambers. But despite all the technological wizardry, the room felt sterile, cold, beautiful but somehow soulless. Amara stood in the center of it all, surrounded by 12 of the most brilliant engineers money could hire, and felt completely alone. "So let me get this straight," said Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the lead thermal engineer, her voice dripping with barely concealed hostility. "You walk in here with zero experience on our systems, zero understanding of our constraints, and you think you can solve problems we've been working on for 2 years?" The other engineers exchanged glances. Amara could feel their resentment like heat from a furnace. To them, she wasn't a brilliant innovator. She was the woman who'd humiliated their CEO and somehow gotten handed a position they'd been competing for. "I understand your skepticism," Amara said calmly. "But thermodynamics is thermodynamics, regardless of the specific application. The laws of physics don't change because you're working for Cross Industries." "The laws of physics maybe," said Thomas Chun, a young engineer with MIT credentials that matched Amara's own. "But engineering reality does. We have manufacturing constraints, cost limitations, integration requirements that your theoretical work doesn't account for." Amara felt her patience beginning to fray. She'd faced the same attitude in every academic setting, every job interview, every professional interaction where she'd had to prove she belonged. But something about the way they dismissed her work she'd pour her soul into, made her anger sharper than usual. That's when Ethan appeared in the doorway. "How's the integration going?" he asked, though the tension in the room was obvious. "About as well as expected," Dr. Walsh said pointedly. "We're just trying to understand how Dr. Williams' theoretical concepts apply to real-world engineering." Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd built this team, handpicked each engineer for their brilliance and innovation. But watching them tear down Amara's work with the same casual dismissal he'd shown at the Ferrari made him feel sick. "Dr. Williams," he said quietly, "could I speak with you privately?" They walked to his adjacent office in silence. Once the door closed, Ethan turned to face her, and Amara was surprised to see genuine distress in his expression. "They're not usually like this," he said. "My team, they're good people. They're just protecting their territory." Amara finished, wondering why the boss suddenly trusts some outsider over people who've been loyal to him for years. Something like that. Amara sat down heavily in one of his leather chairs. "You want to know something funny? I used to dream about working in a place like this. State-of-the-art equipment, unlimited research budgets, brilliant colleagues who shared my passion for innovation. And now I remember why I always worked alone." The sadness in her voice caught Ethan off guard. He'd expected anger, frustration, maybe even demands for better treatment. But this quiet resignation was somehow worse. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said suddenly. Amara's head snapped up. "What?" "Earlier, you mentioned her. And in the lobby, when you said brilliance doesn't need permission to shine, that sounded like something someone taught you." For a moment, Amara's carefully maintained professional mask slipped, revealing something raw and vulnerable. Amara carefully maintained professional mask slipped, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. Her name was Rose Williams. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. Amara's voice grew soft, distant. "She worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, nights cleaning office buildings, days at a dry cleaner, weekends helping people with their taxes during filing season. She sounds incredible. She was everything I wanted to be. Dignified, brilliant, unbreakable." Amara smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. She never made it past 8th grade, but she was smarter than most people with PhDs. Could do complex math in her head, could fix any mechanical problem you put in front of her. Where did you get your love of engineering? From watching her. Our building's elevator was always breaking down, and instead of waiting for the super to fix it, she'd crawl into the shaft with a flashlight and a toolbox. Amara's eyes lit up with the memory. She'd explain everything to me while she worked, how the pulley systems created mechanical advantage, how electrical circuits completed power loops. She made me understand that engineering wasn't about being smart enough to understand complicated things. It was about being curious enough to figure out how to make things better. Ethan found himself leaning forward, drawn into her story in a way that surprised him. What happened to her? Cancer. Just before I started my doctoral program. Amara's voice caught slightly. She never got to see me graduate, never got to see what all her sacrifices built. But I carried her voice with me through every late night, every rejection, every time someone looked at me like I didn't belong. The office fell silent except for the distant hum of the city below. Ethan realized he was seeing something precious. Not Dr. Amara Williams, the brilliant engineer, but Amara the granddaughter, still carrying her grandmother's love like armor against a world that constantly questioned her worth. She'd be proud of you, he said quietly. Would she? Amara met his eyes. I'm not so sure. Rose Williams never would have torn someone down in public, no matter how badly they treated her. She believed in building people up, not breaking them down. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Amara, no, it's okay. You deserved what I said. But that doesn't mean saying it was right. She stood, smoothing her blazer. I should get back to the team. We have a prototype to build. What lesson from a grandparent or mentor still guides you today? How do the people who shaped us continue to influence our choices? Share a memory that still motivates you below. But as she reached for the door handle, Ethan's voice stopped her. My father built Cross Industries. Amara turned back, surprised by the pain in his voice. Richard Cross. Brilliant engineer, terrible businessman, completely absent father. Ethan moved to the window, staring down at the street like he was looking into the past. He had patents for electric motor innovations that were 20 years ahead of their time. But he couldn't raise capital, couldn't manage people, couldn't scale production. The company was failing when he died. How old were you? 15. Old enough to understand that everyone expected me to be him, the brilliant engineer who'd revolutionize transportation. Problem was, I wasn't brilliant. I was decent at math, good with people, excellent at seeing market opportunities. But I wasn't my father. Amara was quiet, sensing he needed to tell this story without interruption. So I created a version of myself that could live up to his legacy. The Harvard MBA was supposed to give me credibility I didn't feel I'd earned. The fake degree was just the beginning. I surrounded myself with brilliant engineers, claimed credit for innovations that were really collaborative efforts, built a mythology around the genius CEO who'd inherited his father's vision. But you did build something extraordinary, Amara said softly. Cross Industries is successful because of your leadership, not despite it. Is it? Ethan turned back to her. Or is it successful because I learned to steal credit from people smarter than me? People like you. The honesty in his voice was devastating. Amara realized she was seeing something she'd never expected. Not the arrogant billionaire who'd humiliated her, but a man who'd been carrying the weight of inadequacy for so long he'd forgotten his own worth. Ethan, she said carefully, what happened at the Ferrari wasn't about you being inadequate. It was about you being afraid. Afraid of what? That someone would see through all the walls you've built and realize that underneath the mythology, you're just human. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But here's what you don't understand. Being human isn't a weakness. It's what makes innovation possible. Their eyes met across the office, and for a moment, neither the brilliant engineer nor the successful CEO existed. There were just two people who'd spent their lives feeling like they had to prove they belonged, recognizing that feeling in each other. "We should get back to the team," Amara said finally, but her voice was gentler than it had been all day. "Amara." Ethan called as she opened the door. "Thank you. For staying. For trying to save something I probably don't deserve to keep." She looked back at him, this complicated man who'd managed to wound her and reveal his own wounds in the span of a few hours. "Maybe that's not the right question," she said. "Maybe the question isn't whether you deserve to keep what you've built. Maybe it's whether you're willing to build something better." As she walked back toward the engineering lab, Amara realized that somewhere in the past hour, her mission had shifted. She was no longer just trying to prove her worth or save her career. She was trying to save a man who'd forgotten that his humanity was his greatest strength. And despite everything, despite the humiliation and the assumptions and the years of fighting to be seen, she found herself hoping he was worth saving. 3 days into their forced partnership, Amara arrived at Cross Industries at 6 a.m. to find Ethan already in the engineering lab, sleeves rolled up, working alongside Thomas Chun on thermal conductivity calculations. Coffee stains decorated his usually pristine shirt, and his perfectly styled hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "You're here early," she said, setting down her own coffee. "Couldn't sleep." He looked up from the equations covering the whiteboard. "Thomas was explaining why your exponential cooling model works in theory, but fails when we account for real-world heat cycling. I wanted to understand." Amara raised an eyebrow. And I think I'm starting to realize how much I don't know about my own company's technology." Thomas Chun glanced between them, clearly uncomfortable with this display of vulnerability from his usually confident CEO. "Sir, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." Ethan's voice was firm but not harsh. "Dr. Williams, walk me through the heat cycling issue. If I'm going to lead this company, I need to understand what we're actually building." For the next hour, Amara found herself in the strangest teaching situation of her career, explaining advanced thermodynamics to a billionaire CEO who asked questions with the humility of a first-year engineering student. But what surprised her most was how quickly he grasped the concepts, how his questions revealed an intuitive understanding of systems thinking that formal education couldn't teach. "So the cascade failure happens because we're treating each thermal zone as independent," Ethan said, studying her diagrams. "But they're actually part of an interconnected network." "Exactly. It's like trying to regulate the temperature in a house by only controlling one room. But your system treats the entire engine as a single thermal ecosystem." "Right. Instead of fighting the heat, we channel it. Use the excess thermal energy from the combustion system to pre-warm the electric motors, which actually improves their efficiency." Ethan stared at the equations like they were a map to buried treasure. That's beautiful. It's not just more efficient, it's elegant." The word hung in the air between them. Amara felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with thermodynamics and everything to do with the way he'd said elegant, like he truly understood what her work meant to her. "Dr. Williams." Jennifer Walsh appeared in the lab doorway, her earlier hostility replaced by professional curiosity. "I've been running simulations on your cascade cooling algorithm. The efficiency gains are, well, they're extraordinary." "Thank you. What about the manufacturing integration?" "That's why I'm here. I think I found a way to retrofit our existing production line to accommodate your component architecture. It would save us millions compared to building new manufacturing infrastructure." As Jennifer spread her modifications across the conference table, other team members began gathering around. The hostility from earlier in the week had evolved into something approaching respect, and Amara found herself in the middle of the kind of collaborative innovation session she dreamed about since graduate school. "If we modify the housing design here," Thomas suggested, "we could reduce the component count by 15%. And if we integrate the thermal sensors into the existing diagnostic network," added Sarah Kim, the systems engineer, "we get real-time optimization without additional hardware costs." Amara watched the team build on her ideas, improving them, making them practical, turning theoretical innovation into engineering reality. For the first time in months, she felt like she belonged somewhere. "This is good work," Ethan said quietly, appearing beside her as the team continued their heated discussions. "Really good work. It's what happens when brilliant people actually work together instead of protecting their territory," Amara replied, but there was no accusation in her voice anymore. "Is that what they were doing? It's what we all do when we're scared." She glanced at him. "Including me." That afternoon, as the team worked to build their first prototype, Amara found herself alone with Ethan in his office again. But this time the atmosphere was different, less adversarial, more comfortable. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said, not looking up from the technical reports scattered across his desk. "Shoot. Why automotive engineering? With your skills, you could have gone into aerospace, medical devices, renewable energy. Why cars?" Amara was quiet for a moment, considering how much truth to share. "You really want to know?" "I really want to know. Because of my grandmother's asthma." The words came out softer than she'd intended. "We lived above an auto repair shop in the South Bronx. Every day, she'd wake up struggling to breathe because of all the exhaust fumes from badly maintained cars. The air in our neighborhood was toxic." Ethan stopped reading, giving her his full attention. "I used to lie awake listening to her cough and thinking that someone somewhere should be smart enough to build cars that didn't make people sick. Cars that were powerful and beautiful but didn't poison the air kids breathed." Amara's voice grew stronger. "Every equation I've written, every patent I've filed, every sleepless night I've spent perfecting thermal management systems, it's all for 8-year-old me, promising my grandmother that someday cars would be different. Did she live to see electric vehicles become mainstream? She died the year Tesla released the Model S." Amara's smile was bittersweet. So close. She would have loved to see cars that ran on electricity instead of gasoline. "She would have loved to see what you've built," Ethan said quietly. "This thermal system you've designed, it's going to make electric vehicles more efficient, more affordable, more accessible. How many grandmothers won't have asthma because of your work?" The question hit Amara like a physical force. She'd been so focused on proving herself, on fighting for recognition, that she'd almost forgotten the actual purpose behind all the fighting. "I hadn't thought about it that way," she admitted. "Maybe that's why you're here. Not just to save my company or prove your worth. Maybe you're here to save some grandmother in the South Bronx who doesn't even know she needs saving yet." Their eyes met, and Amara felt something dangerous happening in her chest. This man who'd humiliated her 3 days ago was somehow seeing deeper into her motivations than she'd seen herself. The combination of vulnerability and insight was devastating to her carefully maintained emotional defenses. "Ethan." "Yeah. For what it's worth, I think your father would be proud of what you've built. Not because you're a genius engineer, but because you're the kind of leader who makes other people's genius possible." The words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, his carefully controlled executive mask slipped completely, revealing raw gratitude and something that looked almost like hope. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thank you." As they sat there in the golden afternoon light streaming through his office windows, both of them understood that something fundamental had shifted. The anger was gone. The professional distance was cracking. What was emerging in its place was more dangerous than either had expected, not just respect, but genuine care for each other's dreams and fears. "We should get back to the team," Amara said finally, though she made no move to stand. "We should," Ethan agreed, also staying perfectly still. "The prototype won't build itself." "It definitely won't." But neither of them moved, both reluctant to break the fragile intimacy that had formed between them. Outside, Manhattan rushed by in its usual chaos, but inside Ethan's office, time seemed suspended, two brilliant, wounded people discovering that sometimes the person who hurts you most is also the person who understands you best. When they finally returned to the engineering lab, the team was celebrating. Their first prototype was complete, and the initial tests were showing thermal efficiency improvements that exceeded even Amara's theoretical projections. "It works," Jennifer Walsh said, her voice filled with amazement. "Dr. Williams, it actually works." As the team crowded around the test results, Amara felt Ethan's hand brush against hers. Just for a moment, just long enough to communicate something that couldn't be said aloud in front of the others. But in that brief touch, she felt the weight of possibility, the dangerous promise of something that could be beautiful if they were brave enough to reach for it. They were building more than just a thermal regulation system. They were building trust, understanding, and maybe, if they didn't destroy it first, something that looked remarkably like the beginning of love. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, 2 weeks into their partnership. Amara was in her apartment, reviewing final calculations for the government presentation, when her phone rang with an unknown number. "Dr. Williams? This is Rebecca Chun from TechCrunch. I'm working on a story about Cross Industries, and I think you should know what we've uncovered." Amara's stomach dropped. What kind of story? About Ethan Cross's pattern of stealing innovations from female engineers and minority researchers. "We have documentation going back 5 years. Patents filed under his name that originated from uncredited team members. A former employee who claims he built his entire reputation on other people's work." The words hit Amara like ice water. That's not possible. "Dr. Williams, I understand you've recently joined his company. Has he offered to put your thermal regulation patents under Cross Industries' corporate ownership? Because if he has, you wouldn't be the first brilliant woman to get taken advantage of." Amara's hands began to shake. The patent transfer documents Ethan had presented yesterday, the ones she hadn't yet signed, suddenly felt like a trap she'd been too naive to see. "I need to go," she whispered. "Dr. Williams, wait. We're publishing tomorrow morning. You might want to distance yourself before." Amara hung up and stared at her phone like it was a bomb that had just exploded her entire world. The next morning, Amara arrived at Cross Industries to find chaos. Reporters crowded the lobby, employees whispered in hallways, and the atmosphere crackled with the electricity of a corporate scandal breaking wide open. The TechCrunch article was devastating. The billionaire who built his empire on stolen innovation, how Ethan Cross systematically exploited minority engineers. It included interviews with 3 former employees, all women, 2 of them women of color, describing a pattern of behavior that made Amara's blood run cold. Patents stolen. Credit taken. Brilliant innovations attributed to Ethan while the actual creators were pushed out or marginalized. The thermal regulation breakthrough that Cross Industries is showcasing to the government next week. Read one particularly damning quote from former engineer Dr. Maria Santos. "That's classic Ethan Cross. Find a desperate, brilliant woman, promise her the world, then take her work and claim it as company innovation." Amara felt sick. Every moment of vulnerability she'd shared, every professional confidence, every growing feeling of trust and connection, had it all been calculated manipulation? She found Ethan in his office, staring at his computer screen with the expression of a man watching his life collapse in real time. "Is it true?" she asked without preamble. He looked up, and the pain in his eyes was so raw it took her breath away. "Amara, is it true?" she repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "It's complicated." "Complicated." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Did you steal Dr. Santos's battery management algorithms, or didn't you?" Ethan's silence was answer enough. "Did you put your name on Dr. Jennifer Park's cooling system patents? The company funded the research. Did you or didn't you?" "Yes." The word came out like a physical wound, but not the way they're making it sound. These women were team members, they were compensated, they were credited. "Amara, you don't understand how corporate research works. I understand exactly how it works." Her voice rose. cutting through his explanations like a blade. I understand that brilliant women do the work and powerful men take the credit. I understand that we're supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to make you look like a genius. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted wasn't who you thought they were? How do you handle that moment when everything you believed gets turned upside down? Share your experience below. We've all been there. Ethan stood, moving toward her with his hands raised, like he was approaching a wounded animal. It's not like that with you. What we've built these past 2 weeks. What we've built. Amara's laugh was bitter. You mean what I've built while you planned to steal it? No. Amara, I swear to you, the patent agreements, the Chief Innovation Officer position, it's all real. I'm not trying to steal your work. Then why didn't you tell me about the others? Why didn't you mention that you have a history of taking credit for women's innovations? Because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Ethan's frustration finally boiled over. I knew you'd assume the worst, that you'd think I was manipulating you. Maybe because you were. I wasn't. He slammed his hand against his desk, and for a moment, Amara saw a flash of the arrogant man who'd yelled at her about his Ferrari. Everything I've shared with you, everything about my father, about feeling inadequate, that was real. My feelings for you are real. The words hung in the air like a confession neither of them was prepared for. Amara stared at him, her anger warring with something that felt dangerously like hope. Your feelings for me? Yes. His voice was raw, honest. I'm falling in love with you, Amara. That's why this is so terrifying. Because for the first time in my life, I found someone who sees past all the mythology I've built, someone who challenges me to be better, and now I'm losing her because of mistakes I made before I even knew she existed. For a moment, Amara's resolve wavered. The pain in his voice was so genuine, so desperate, that part of her wanted to believe him. But then she thought about Dr. Santos, about Dr. Park, about every brilliant woman who'd probably heard similar words from powerful men who took their work and left them with nothing. How do I know you're not lying? She asked quietly. How do I know this isn't just another manipulation, another way to make me sign those patent transfers? Because I'm not asking you to sign them. Ethan moved to his desk, pulled out the documents they'd prepared, and fed them into his paper shredder. There. Your work stays yours. Your name goes on the patents. I don't care if it costs me the government contract. Amara watched the documents disappear, piece by piece, and felt her anger begin to crack. But underneath it was something worse than rage, disappointment so profound it felt like grief. It's too late, Ethan. What do you mean? I mean the damage is done. The government presentation is Monday. Senator Davidson will read this article. Even if I believe you're telling the truth now, how can I work for a company with this reputation? How can I build my career on a foundation of other women's stolen work? Then help me fix it. His voice was desperate now. Help me make it right. We'll contact Dr. Santos and Dr. Park, we'll give them the credit they deserve, we'll restructure the company's patent policies. And you think that erases 5 years of systematic exploitation? No, but it's a start. Amara, please. Don't let the mistakes I made before destroy what we could build together. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the confident billionaire or the arrogant CEO, but a flawed, frightened man who'd spent so long living a lie that he'd forgotten how to tell the truth. Part of her wanted to save him. Part of her wanted to rebuild what they'd started to create. But a larger part, the part that sounded like her grandmother's voice, reminded her that some patterns couldn't be broken by love alone. I can't, she said finally, and the words felt like they were tearing her apart. I can't be the woman who helps you rehabilitate your image, while other women are still paying the price for your choices. So that's it? You're walking away. I'm protecting myself. She picked up her portfolio, the same leather bag her grandmother had given her, and headed for the door. Something I should have done the moment you yelled at me about your Ferrari. Amara, wait, but she was already gone, leaving Ethan alone in his office with the wreckage of his reputation and the devastating realization that the woman he'd fallen in love with was walking out of his life. And this time, he couldn't blame her for it. The elevator doors closed between them. Both Amara and Ethan understood that they just reached the point of no return. The question was whether love, real, complicated, imperfect love, would be enough to build a bridge back to each other, or whether some betrayals cut too deep to heal. The Morrison Automotive interview that Amara had missed 3 weeks ago was rescheduled for Friday afternoon. She sat in their gleaming conference room, facing a panel of executives who'd undoubtedly read every word of the TechCrunch expose, and tried to pretend her heart wasn't breaking. "Dr. Williams," said the hiring manager, a middle-aged man whose kind eyes reminded her painfully of Frank from the Ferrari dealership, "your credentials are obviously impressive. But we have to ask about your recent association with Cross Industries. I understand your concerns. The article suggests a pattern of problematic behavior regarding intellectual property. How can we be sure you haven't been compromised by that environment?" Amara had prepared for this question, but sitting there under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by the sterile professionalism she'd once craved, the answer felt hollow. "My work with Cross Industries was brief and contractual. My thermal regulation patents remain entirely under my ownership. I have documentation proving that Mr. Cross made no claim to my intellectual property." It was all true. It was also meaningless compared to the weight pressing on her chest every time she thought about Ethan's face when she'd walked away. "And if we offered you a position here, you'd have no conflicted loyalties." None whatsoever. But even as she said it, Amara knew it was a lie. Because 3 hours after walking out of Cross Industries, she'd realized something devastating. She'd fallen in love with a deeply flawed man who was trying to become better, and walking away hadn't made that love disappear. It had just made it hurt. 20 blocks away, Ethan sat in his office staring at the phone he'd picked up and put down 17 times in the past hour. His finger hovered over Amara's contact, but every time he started to dial, he heard her voice. "I can't be the woman who helps you rehabilitate your image while other women are still paying the price for your choices." She was right. About everything. His assistant knocked. "Mr. Cross? Dr. Santos and Dr. Park are here for the meeting you requested." The two women who entered his office carried themselves with the same professional dignity Amara possessed, but their eyes held the wariness of people who'd been burned before. Dr. Maria Santos, late 30s with prematurely gray hair and intelligent dark eyes, sat with the posture of someone ready for battle. Dr. Jennifer Park, younger but with an air of hard-won skepticism, remained standing until Ethan gestured for her to sit. "Thank you for coming," Ethan began, then stopped. Every corporate script he'd ever learned felt inadequate for this moment. "I owe you both an apology. A real one." Dr. Santos raised an eyebrow. "We're listening. What I did to both of you, taking credit for your innovations, burying your contributions in corporate hierarchy, letting you leave without acknowledgement, it was wrong. Not legally wrong, not technically wrong, but morally wrong. And you're realizing this now because—" Dr. Park's voice was carefully neutral. "Because someone I care about made me see that I've spent 5 years building my reputation on other people's brilliance while telling myself it was just good business." Have you ever had to confront your own mistakes and apologize for real harm you've caused? What made you finally see the truth about your actions? Share your story below. Real change starts with honest accountability. Dr. Santos leaned forward. "Mr. Cross, with respect, apologies are nice. But what are you actually prepared to do?" Ethan slid 2 documents across his desk. "Full retroactive patent credits for both of your innovations. Your names as primary inventors, Cross Industries listed as funding source only. Plus a licensing fee for the years we've been using your work without proper attribution." The women exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this level of contrition. "The licensing fees alone are worth millions," Dr. Park said slowly. "Money you should have received years ago." Ethan's voice was steady, resolute. "I can't undo the damage to your careers, the opportunities you lost because I took credit for your work. But I can make sure you're compensated and credited going forward." "What's the catch?" Dr. Santos asked. "There's always a catch." "No catch. No gag order, no non-disclosure agreement, no requirement that you speak positively about Cross Industries. You can tell anyone anything you want about your experiences here." The silence stretched until Dr. Park broke it. "Why now? Why are you doing this now?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Amara's grandmother, about building something better, about the difference between being successful and being worthy of love. "Because I met someone who made me realize that success built on other people's stolen dreams isn't success at all. It's just elaborate theft." 3 hours later, Ethan stood outside Morrison Automotive's headquarters, watching through the glass lobby as Amara shook hands with executives who would probably offer her the position she deserved. She looked professional, composed, successful, everything she'd worked her entire life to become. She also looked miserable. He didn't approach her, didn't call her name. Instead, he stood across the street like a stalker, trying to memorize the way she moved, the way she carried herself, the way her hair caught the late afternoon light. Because after today, he might never see her again. His phone buzzed with a text from his PR director. Senator Davidson's office called. "They want to discuss moving forward with the contract despite the article. Apparently Dr. Santos and Dr. Park both reached out to recommend you. What should I tell them?" Ethan stared at the message, then at Amara emerging from the building. She was checking her phone, probably scheduling follow-up interviews, planning a future that didn't include him. The smart business decision would be to take the meeting, salvage the contract, rebuild his reputation. Instead, he typed back, "Tell them the meeting is off. Cross Industries is withdrawing from consideration. Sir. The thermal regulation system we were going to present belongs to Dr. Amara Williams. Without her partnership, we have nothing worth presenting." He was about to put his phone away when he saw Amara stop walking. She was staring at her screen, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and something that might have been hope. Someone had clearly just told her about Cross Industries withdrawing from the government contract. Their eyes met across the busy Manhattan street. For a moment, neither moved. Then Amara did something that made Ethan's heart stop. She smiled. Not the sharp surgical smile she'd used to demolish him at the Ferrari, but the genuine radiant smile he'd glimpsed when she talked about her grandmother's engineering lessons. She crossed the street against the light, dodging taxis and ignoring honking horns, until she stood in front of him on the sidewalk. "You withdrew from the contract," she said. "It was your work. I had no right to present it without you. Ethan, I talked to Dr. Santos and Dr. Park today. Gave them full credit and compensation for their work. It's not enough, but it's a start." Amara studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. Instead, she saw something she'd never expected: peace. The desperate, grasping quality that had always lurked behind his confidence was gone, replaced by something calmer, more genuine. "How did the Morrison interview go?" he asked. "They offered me the position." "That's wonderful. You deserve it." "Do I?" She stepped closer. "Because I've spent the past 3 days thinking about something you said. About building something better instead of just protecting what we already have." "Amara," I turned them down. Ethan's heart stopped. "Why?" "Because Morrison Automotive wants to hire Dr. Amara Williams, the brilliant engineer who can solve their problems. But you were the first person who saw Amara Williams, the woman who carries her grandmother's voice and dreams of cleaner air in the South Bronx." The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe love isn't about finding someone perfect. Maybe it's about finding someone worth growing with." She took a breath that seemed to require all her courage. "I'm saying that if you're serious about building something better, really building it, not just talking about it, then maybe we should build it together." Ethan felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked away since his father died and left him feeling inadequate and alone. "Are you sure? Because I can't promise I won't make more mistakes. I can't promise I'll always do the right thing. I can't promise that either." Amara smiled, and it was like sunrise after the longest night of his life. But maybe that's what makes it worth trying. As they stood there on a busy Manhattan sidewalk, surrounded by the chaos of rush-hour traffic and the constant motion of 8 million lives, Ethan Cross and Dr. Amara Williams made a choice that would change everything. They chose love over fear, growth over perfection, and each other over the safer, lonelier alternatives. The hardest choice was also somehow the easiest one they'd ever made. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the newly renovated Cross-Williams Innovation Lab, illuminating workstations where diverse teams of engineers collaborated on projects that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The space hummed with the energy of genuine innovation, not the sterile perfection of corporate research, but the messy, creative chaos of brilliant minds working toward a common purpose. Amara stood at the center of it all, wearing a lab coat over jeans and sneakers, her hair pulled back as she guided a team of young engineers through the final tests of their latest breakthrough. A thermal regulation system so advanced it made her original patents look like rough sketches. "The beauty of this design," she explained to the eager faces around her, "is that it doesn't just solve the heat management problem, it turns the heat into an asset. Every BTU that used to be waste energy now contributes to system efficiency." "Dr. Williams," asked Maria, a brilliant 24-year-old who reminded Amara of herself at that age, "how did you know to approach it as an ecosystem instead of individual components?" Amara smiled, thinking of a conversation in a Brooklyn auto repair shop 20 years ago. "Someone very wise once taught me that engineering isn't about understanding complicated things. It's about being curious enough to figure out how to make things better. And the best solutions usually come from seeing connections that others miss." From across the lab, Ethan watched her teach with the same fascination he'd felt that first day when she'd explained Ferrari's thermal systems. But now there was something deeper in his observation, not just admiration for her brilliance, but love for the way she poured her entire soul into making others better. The Cross-Williams partnership had been the subject of countless business articles, TED Talks, and case studies in corporate transformation. How a public humiliation became a love story that changed an industry had been the Harvard Business Review's most read piece of the year. But those articles missed the daily reality of what they'd built, not just a successful company, but a genuine partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the radical idea that business success and human dignity weren't mutually exclusive. "Earth to Ethan," came a voice behind him. He turned to find Dr. Maria Santos approaching, carrying a tablet and wearing the kind of smile that usually preceded good news. "The government presentation results," he asked. "Better than results. Senator Davidson wants to expand the program nationally. Every federal vehicle fleet in America will be retrofitted with our system over the next 5 years." Maria's grin was infectious. "Congratulations, you two just revolutionized sustainable transportation." Ethan felt the familiar surge of professional triumph, but it was tempered now by something more meaningful, the knowledge that this success belonged to everyone who'd contributed to it, and that the real victory wasn't the contract, but the cleaner air it would create for communities like the one where Amara had grown up. "Have you told Amara? I thought you'd want to do the honors." As Maria walked away, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text that made him smile. "Lunch on the roof garden? I have news." The roof garden had been Amara's idea, a green space on top of Cross Industries where employees could eat lunch surrounded by plants instead of concrete. It was practical. The vegetation helped cool the building, but it was also beautiful, a reminder that innovation should serve life, not dominate it. Amara was waiting for him at their usual table, but instead of her typical salad, she'd ordered 2 glasses of champagne. "Celebrating something?" Ethan asked as he sat down. "Maybe. Depends on how you feel about expanding our partnership. Maria told me about the government contract. It's incredible, Amara. Your thermal system is going to be in every, not that kind of expansion." Her smile was nervous, excited, and slightly terrified all at once. A more personal kind. Ethan's brain went completely blank. Personal. Instead of answering, Amara reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. For a moment, Ethan wondered if he was hallucinating. "Amara, are you proposing?" "Yes." She opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Not the massive diamond most people would expect a billionaire's girlfriend to choose, but something thoughtful. Meaningful. "I know it's supposed to be the other way around, but I've never been good at waiting for other people to make the first move." Ethan stared at her, this incredible woman who changed everything about his life, and felt emotions he didn't have words for. "Before you answer," Amara continued, her voice gaining strength, "I need you to understand what you'd be signing up for. I will never be the silent partner who smiles and looks pretty at corporate events. I will challenge you when you're wrong, push you to be better than you think you can be, and probably embarrass you in public at least once a year by being too passionate about thermodynamics. Amara, I will insist on naming our children after scientists instead of family members. I will turn our garage into a workshop whether you like it or not. And I will never ever stop expecting you to grow into the man I believe you can be. What would you want your partner to promise you? Not the sweet stuff, but the real, challenging, grow-together stuff? What kind of love pushes you to be your best self? Share your thoughts below." Ethan stood up slowly, moved around the table, and dropped to one knee in front of her chair. "Amara Williams," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I would be honored to spend the rest of my life being challenged, pushed, embarrassed, and loved by you. Is that a yes?" "That's a hell yes." He took the ring from the box, slipped it onto his finger, and then pulled her down to kiss him properly. "But I have some conditions of my own." "I'm listening." "I want to do this right. The engagement, the wedding, the marriage, all of it. I want to meet your friends, your family, everyone who helped make you who you are. I want to take you back to the South Bronx and see where your grandmother taught you to be an engineer. And I want to spend our honeymoon in a place with terrible cell service so I can focus entirely on my wife." Wife. Amara tested the word, liking how it sounded. "I like the sound of that." Mrs. Cross Williams. "Dr. Cross Williams, thank you very much." Dr. Cross Williams. Ethan grinned. The woman who's going to save the world one thermal regulation system at a time. As they sat there on the roof of the building where they'd first fought and then fallen in love, surrounded by growing things and looking out over a city full of possibilities, both of them understood that they'd found something rare, not just love, but partnership. Not just success, but purpose. Not just a happy ending, but a beginning that promised to be even better than anything they could have imagined alone. 1 year later the wedding was held in the South Bronx, in the community garden that had been built where Amara's grandmother's building once stood. It wasn't the glamorous Manhattan venue that society pages expected, but it was perfect, a celebration of love surrounded by the community that had shaped Amara's values and dreams, as they exchanged vows under string lights and flowering vines, with children from the neighborhood peeking through the fence and elderly women who remembered Rose Williams dabbing at their eyes. Ethan understood that this was what success actually looked like. Not monuments to individual achievement, but connections. That made everyone stronger. Do you, Ethan Cross, take Dr. Amara Williams to be your partner in innovation, your co-conspirator in making the world better, and your wife? I do. And do you, Dr. Amara Williams, take Ethan Cross to be your partner in all things, your fellow dreamer, and your husband? I do. When the officiator pronounced them married, the entire neighborhood erupted in cheers. But in that moment, as Ethan kissed his brilliant, challenging, extraordinary wife, all he could hear was the echo of words spoken a year ago beside a Ferrari, the sound of two people choosing to build something beautiful together. Later, as they danced to music that mixed jazz standards with salsa rhythms, Amara whispered in his ear, "You know what the best part of this is?" "What?" "Your grandmother would have loved her," Ethan said, understanding immediately. "And your father would have been proud of the man you've become." As the evening wound down and their guests began to drift away, Ethan and Amara stood together in the garden where it all began. Not their love story, but the foundation of values that had made their love possible. The city stretched out around them, full of people whose lives would be touched by the innovations they'd create together, the cleaner air they'd help provide, the barriers they'd continue to break down. "Ready for the next adventure, Dr. Cross Williams?" Ethan asked. "Ready, Mr. Cross Williams." Hand in hand, they walked toward their future, a future where brilliant, flawed people could find each other across the vast distances of assumption and prejudice, where love could be both challenging and gentle, where the best innovations came not from individual genius but from the magic that happened when different kinds of brilliance chose to work together. Behind them, the Ferrari, now painted in solar panel blue instead of crimson, and converted to run entirely on Amara's revolutionary electric system, sat parked at the curb. Not a symbol of wealth and exclusion anymore, but a testament to the power of transformation, to the beautiful things that could happen when people chose to see beyond surfaces to souls. And the end, that's what their love story had always been about. The radical, revolutionary act of seeing each other clearly, completely, and choosing to build something better than either could create alone. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next. Click on the image or video showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.